Good morning, everyone, and well, good afternoon, and welcome to this panel on day 2 of the South Asia SBCC conversations. I know many of us were very disappointed when the summit didn't happen way back in 2020, which feels like so long ago. But at least I think it's great that we're able to have these conversations now. And the last 2 years have really been unprecedented for both development practitioners, people working in public health, of course, and people working in communications. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to learn from each other's work. And let me introduce myself. I'm Anupama Srinivasan. I work with an organization called REACH, based in Chennai in India. And we work primarily on tuberculosis. Personally, I began life in the journalism, documentary filmmaking, and communication space, wandered into public health and TB 12 years ago and stayed, basically. So right now I work at the intersection of public health, communications, and since 2013, issues of gender and sexuality as well. And maybe we can talk about this a little bit more later. Today's panel is on new insights for inclusion in sexuality and gender. And I think this is really an area where there are no absolutes, where we keep learning all the time. And I've also personally begun to really understand that this is a space where we have to be willing to learn, to change our opinions, to acknowledge new thinking, new ideas, whether it's the language we use, whether it's inclusion, exclusion. And this is really fundamental to how we communicate, and also how, as people working in this space, we can try and shape attitudes and behaviors and move towards more inclusive conversations around gender and sexuality. So with that very brief preamble, we have 2 oral presentations today. But before we move to that, a few very basic housekeeping rules that I think we're all very familiar with by now. Please do keep yourselves muted during the presentations. If you do have any questions, please feel free to use the chat box, and maybe because we're a small group, at the end of the presentations, we could invite people with specific questions to speak. Presenters will have between 10 to 15 minutes. We'll keep a track of time and do our best to take as many questions as possible and try and have a lively discussion around these issues. And there's so much to talk about, really. So on that note, let me introduce the first presentation. This is on development and validation of a theory-based gender norm scale, or the GNS, by Erica Sedlander and colleagues who are from the University of California, San Francisco. Erica is a social and behavioral scientist, and their presentation is really looking at the theme of catalyzing transformational change. And I think addressing this important challenge of measurement in the gender space, which is something we are all constantly grappling with. We know how important it is to work on gender, but how do we really measure it in a way that we can convince others and strengthen the evidence base? Unfortunately, because of the time difference, Erica isn't here on the panel live, but we will be playing her presentation now. So over to the team to play her presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're watching this. My name is Erica Sedlander, and I'm going to be talking to you about our study called The G-Norm, Development and Validation of a Theory-Based Gender Norm Scale. My co-authors are Bart Bingenheimer, Michael Long, Minati Swain, Nadia Diamond-Smith, and Rajiv Rimal. And we're from the George Washington University Milken Institute School of Public Health. We're also from GCOR Consulting in India, University of California, San Francisco, and Johns Hopkins University. So just a brief background, so everyone's on the same page. Social norms are rules of behavior that are considered acceptable in a group or society. and gender norms are just a subset of social norms around expectations for how different genders should behave. So we wanted to create and develop a new gender norm scale because we went to the literature and existing scales, there are some out there that are often used to measure gender norms, but in actuality, they're really measuring, they're really taking aggregates of individual attitudes and behaviors, which isn't quite social norms. So to measure social norms, that's a social phenomenon at the interpersonal level, so you'd need to include a reference group. So when we found that none of a measure that didn't actually measure social norms properly existed, we decided to create our own. We also found that a lot of the current measures focused on sexual and reproductive health and gender-based violence, and we wanted to expand that to other behaviors like child marriage or other health behaviors that might be impacted by gender norms. So to create and to validate a novel gender norm scale, we are using data that's part of a larger project called the RANI Project, Reduction in Anemia Through Normative Innovations. And this is a cluster randomized control trial being conducted right now in Angul, Odisha, India. So all the data that I'm going to present today is going to be using is data from this setting and from this study. So there are two main theories that are we kind of used as the backdrop of creating and validating this new gender norm scale. The first is a theory of normative social behavior. Within the theory of normative social behavior, there are two major tenets that we really wanted to capture within our gender norm scale. The first is, and they're different constructs, and they're important because they measure different things, they happen at different times, and they motivate behavior differently. So descriptive norms are perceptions of what people actually do. What are your perceptions of what people are doing in your community? Injunctive norms are perceptions about what others expect of you. So they might not align and often don't actually. And the theory of gender and power by Connell is another important theory that we wanted to really help us structure our scale. So within the theory of gender and power, there's three subdomains, and that's the sexual division of labor, the sexual division of power, and the structure of cathexis, which you might be the least familiar with. And the structure of cathexis really just talks about the unequal roles and norms that are often dictated in heterosexual relationships. So now I'll go into the methods for how we created the scale. So we started with qualitative data to understand the social context and to really understand the gender norms where we would be collecting the questionnaire data. So we collected qualitative data from 4 villages in Odisha, India. We had 16 focus groups with women of reproductive age, mothers-in-law, and husbands to not only get women's perspectives, but their social reference groups. And then we conducted 25 key informant interviews. And this qualitative research really helped us to understand what are the existing gender norms within the areas we're working, and to help us come up with the items for our scale. So we really found that unequal gender norms were an upstream barrier to women's overall health and well-being, and that there were 3 main subdomains that kind of emerged from our qualitative data. The first is gender roles, which is difference in expectations around how men and women are expected to behave. The second is household power and decision-making, so differences in power and decision-making within the household and how that differed by gender. And then lastly, other-oriented, which you might be less familiar with. And that's the socialization of women to put others first at the expense of their own health and their own needs. So that's really putting family, children, friends, husband, anyone, and really putting yourself last. So just one quote from a large data set is a doctor said, women, don't give themselves importance. They sacrifice their own health. So I wanted to capture these 3 domains within our gender norm scale. So to create the scale, as opposed to doing exploratory factor analysis, we came in with pre-existing hypotheses based on the literature, based on our theories, and based on our qualitative research. So of these 2 hypotheses, our first is that confirmatory factor analysis will result in 2 subscales, descriptive and injunctive gender norms. And another subpart of our first hypothesis is that it might, on the other hand, we hypothesize that it will that our gender norm scale will result in a 6-factor model. And this would be 3 domains. So the 3 that I just talked about: gender roles, household power and decision-making, and then other oriented. But then these would be separated out by descriptive and injunctive norms. So we'd have 6 total. So that's really taking into account the 2 theories that I just talked about and our qualitative research. And then our second hypothesis, which also helps to validate our scale, that's actually tapping into the construct of gender norms, is that we hypothesize that younger, more educated women who are not part of the most vulnerable population, which is the tribal population, will report more equitable gender norms compared to their counterparts. So to develop and validate the scale, there were really 4 main steps. The first was the most time-intensive. The first was really our literature review, an understanding and decision about which theories to use, and our qualitative findings. And that helped us to come up with emerging themes, and then to develop our 28 questions and 3 domains that we started with for the questionnaire administration. Once we had these 28 questions, we had 5 experts in gender norms review to make sure that our items aligned with their interpretation of gender norms in the field. Then we did some cognitive testing with women in villages right outside of where we'd be testing it to make sure that they understood the questions as we hoped they would. We pilot tested it with 36 women. Our next step was actual questionnaire administration. So we administered the questionnaire to 3,110 women of reproductive age, age 15 to 49 in Angul, Odisha, India. Then we analyzed the data and validated the scale. So to analyze and validate the scale, we used confirmatory factor analysis, as I mentioned. We evaluated eigenvalues and scree plots to examine the total number of factors to retain. We evaluated factor loadings, and then we tested 4 different models to see which fit the data best. And we used structural equation modeling to compare models, and then modified based on suggested model fit indices. And then to validate, as I mentioned before, we wanted to test to see if the subgroups that we hypothesized reported more equitable gender norms than their counterparts. So what did we find? We found that our final model, we had 2 factors. So our first hypothesis, if you can remember, is that a 2-factor model would fit the data. And our second hypothesis is the 6-factor model would fit the data best. So if you look at the first 2 columns, you can see that those are both have the full 28 items. But as you move to the right, the 3rd and the 4th column only include 18 items. That's because, based on best practices in survey development, we dropped any items with factor loadings less than 0.4, 1 at a time. So that ended up, based on that, we ended up with 18 items in our final model. And the green highlighted cells mean that the model cutoffs fit the data for a satisfactory or a good model fit. So as you can see, as you move to the right, there's many more green cells. And our final model, which has 18 items, it's a 2-factor model, which is just descriptive and injunctive norms, fits the data best. And we also modified the model based on some model fit indices, which was just making some errors covary that also aligned with what theoretically made sense. So to give you a sense, this is our 2-factor model. The first, and each subscale has 9 items. The first is descriptive gender norms with an alpha of 0.84, and the second is injunctive gender norms with an alpha of 0.85. And all the questions are on a 5-point Likert scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree. So as you can see, we use the same reference group for all of the questions, which is something the experts who reviewed it and in the pilot testing turned out to be the most simple to understand. So our reference group is in most families you know. We're trying to tap into the village where you live, the community where you live. So to give you a sense of one item on the descriptive gender norms scale, it says the first item, in most families you know, women eat whatever is left over after the rest of their family has finished eating. So this is the descriptive item. And then as you can see in the injunctive subscale that I'll go to now, it's really the, this is the injunctive subscale, and it's really just the question mirrored, but similar, but slightly different. So most families, you know, believe in that women should eat last. So it's not what women are doing, but the expectations are what they should be doing. So we looked at the variance inflation factor. We want to check for multicollinearity to ensure that these are indeed two separate constructs, and that multicollinearity wasn't a problem. So we know that while these are similar questions, they're tapping into two different constructs, and we can use them in the same model, which will be helpful to understand if and when descriptive norms change versus injunctive norms, and which is more prevalent in the community. So our second hypothesis really is that response to gender norm scale will differ by age, education, and caste. We predicted that younger, more educated women who don't come from the tribal population will report more equitable gender norms, and that's what we found. So if you look at age, you can see here that you know, the younger age group has higher numbers. Higher average here really means more equitable gender norms. So you can see that the younger age group has higher reported gender norms compared to the older age groups, and that's only significant for the injunctive norm subscale. And for education, more education in both the descriptive and injunctive subscale was significantly more women with more education reported significantly higher more equitable gender norms than their less educated counterparts. And with caste, as predicted for the descriptive but not the injunctive subscale, scheduled tribe, the most vulnerable of the caste and tribe group, reported the least equitable gender norms. So it helps to validate our findings that we are how we would expect these gender norms to be reported by subgroup was indeed the case. So in conclusion, our first hypothesis was confirmed, that a two-factor model really fit the data best. So we didn't have the six-factor model with the three different subdomains, but just simply descriptive and injunctive gender norms, which we wanted to include to really be representative of the theory of normative social behavior and tap into these different important constructs within that theory. And both of these subscales had high internal validity with the 0.84 and 0.85 in both subscales. And then our second hypothesis was confirmed. Younger, more educated women who were not part of the tribal population reported more equitable gender norms. So our study, of course, has some strengths, but also some limitations. One limitation is that we're really touting the fact that we're measuring perceived you know, community level norms, which is really what perceptions are, what's happening in your community, which is what social norms are in fact. But to be able to empirically show that this is tapping into a different construct beyond individual attitudes and behaviors, it would have been nice to have to also measure that aggregate of individual attitudes and behaviors, but we did not do that. We also only included one reference group, which is most families you know. It would have been nice to include others. And this, we only tested the scale in women of reproductive age. It would be wonderful to test this in men or older women who we know influence women a great deal. Some strengths, though, is that our scale is grounded in qualitative research within the community and also theory. We are able to have two, you know, descriptive and injunctive subscales, which helped us to understand the phenomenon of gender norms in a more nuanced way, and to understand how they are, how they might change differently. We also did cognitive testing and pilot testing within the community. We have a large random sample. And lastly, this is a parsimonious scale with 9 items in each subscale. So researchers, given that it's parsimonious, hopefully they can use it more within their limited resources. And if they had to, you could choose to use one subscale or the other for a total of 18 items. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to Erica for that fascinating presentation, and I'm wishing she was here so we could ask her. I at least have questions. I see a question from Ragini in the chat box on what is the difference between eating last and eating after everyone eats. Since Erica is not here, she did, however, indicate that she would be happy to receive questions on email. So if I could request the support team to maybe share her email address, and if anyone wants to write to her directly to clarify anything regarding this presentation.
Absolutely, Anupama. We'll just put it on the chat shortly.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
I said we'll just put it in the chat shortly. Absolutely, we
Okay.
can do that.
All right, thank you so much. So let's move on to the second presentation today, which is on a knowledge platform on sexual and reproductive health and rights from Bangladesh, authored by Arnob Chakrabarty and Nujhat. So Arnob Chakrabarty is the project director of ShareNet Bangladesh and managing director of ShareNet. He has more than 20 years of experience in developing innovative communication materials for social and behavior change, in producing documentaries for television channels in Bangladesh, the Netherlands, France, Belgium, and UK. And he's worked in close collaboration with organizations like UNICEF, World Press Photo, and several others. Nujhat Khan will be presenting today. He's a copywriter at Red Orange Media and Communications. She's written many blogs and articles on SBCC, specifically on sexual and reproductive health and rights. She's developed scripts for videos around themes of SBCC, again, for NGOs like BRAC and ActionAid. Her most recent research, funded by ShareNet International, explores the relationship between sexual and reproductive health and rights and mental health. So we're delighted to have Nujhat here with us today, and over to you for the presentation.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Is the video disabled from your end?
No, you should be able to. I've requested you to start video. It should allow you to.
Just a second.
I'm sending it again, the request. You should just be able to start it after that.
Okay, it's showing that the video is failing to start. So just a second.
Just try now.
It's failing.
So let's do without video then.
Okay. Okay, so we can continue without the video only, then with just the audio. So let me share my screen.
Would you like me to stop sharing the screen for you then?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Are you able to see it on the screen?
Oh, we can still see your screen.
All right, I'll just show. There,
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you see my screen now?
Not yet. Yeah, it's coming in. It's slowly coming.
Okay. Okay, so here's my screen, and I am presenting with my colleague, Mr. Arnob Chakrabarty. So both of us are going to present this together. So, we are going to talk about ShareNet Bangladesh, which is a knowledge platform on sexual and reproductive health and rights. And we are going to tell you how we are working to bring SBCC professionals in one place. So.
Yes, good afternoon from Dhaka. This is Arnob Chakrabarty. We would thank you very much for offering us this opportunity to give this presentation. We would like to add that this is not a research finding presentation, but rather a presentation of a successful model for SBCC that we have been implementing and it's rather and sharing of our experiences.
Okay, so I want to start by introducing like ShareNet operates. ShareNet operates mainly with its members. That's why I want to start by introducing a few of ShareNet's members. So first we have Shakhawat, who is a young professional, and he has done a lot of work in the development sector in the field of SBCC for climate change, SRHR, and the WASH. Next, we have Dr. Julia Ahmed.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Nujhat. If you're moving your slides, we're not able to see the movement. You might have to come back to normal view.
Sorry, you cannot see the second and third slide, you mean?
No, because if you're in slide share mode, then we won't be able to see it. That's a problem with Zoom. So you'll have to stop the slideshow and just show us the normal view. Yeah.
Oh, can you see it now?
Yeah, now it's visible. Yeah, the
Okay,
movement is visible.
Okay. Okay, so let me continue. Next, we have another member, Dr. Julia Ahmed, who has more than 25 years of experience in reproductive health and rights. So we have another member, Mansoura, who is also another young researcher, and she has done a lot of work in the field of SRHR, mental health, and women and girls leadership. So next, where does ShareNet come in? Let us see. So over here, ShareNet comes in here, where we provide a platform for these individuals who has been working independently. So in this platform, we bring these individuals together so that they have the opportunity to network with each other, to learn from each other, and to share their knowledge with each other. So this is what ShareNet does. So we work on the basis of 5 pillars that you can see over here. Over here, we believe that these pillars facilitate the use of knowledge for planning and creating long-term change in people's behavior. These are knowledge generation, knowledge sharing, knowledge translation, promotion of knowledge use, and networking. Okay. So next, let me talk about what we do and what makes ShareNet a successful model. So ShareNet is active through both online and in-person activities. We believe that this is different because it is made up of its members. So we encourage all the members to own this platform so that they can come to us and tell us that they have an idea or they want to do something, and the ShareNet is there only to support them and to facilitate their activities. So the members, they come up with their own initiatives, and we just give them the support that they need. So if I talk about some of our in-person activities, we conduct knowledge fairs that brings about hundreds of professionals together. We organize in international co-creation conferences where the other hubs of ShareNet, where members from the other hubs of ShareNet, which are present in other countries, like the Netherlands, Bangladesh is the first hub. We have other hubs in Burkina Faso, in Burundi. So these the members from all these international ShareNet hubs, they come together to exchange their knowledge. Then nationally, we have communities of practices based on different topics, and we also disseminate research grants, and we also organize trainings for the members. These are our in-person activities. Regarding our online activities, we are active on the website where we share the latest news and blogs in SRHR. We share SRHR-based research through our e-library, and awareness campaigns are continuously disseminated through our social media pages. Next, we want to talk about our approach.
Yes. Yes. The thing is that we have from the very beginning, and this is what I would like to share with you, that we have taken a different approach than most of the platforms. This platform, you would say, what we see, that there are quite a lot of platforms around the world on social and behavioral change. Knowledge platforms are there. But what we have seen in that our platform, comparatively, if we compare with other platforms, that it works very well. It is engaging its members in a completely different way than most of the platforms, and this is because of the completely different approach that we have taken for this knowledge sharing platform. And the key factors of this approach are that it's being run by the private sector. The ShareNet is being hosted by Red Orange Media and Communications. It's an international communication agency for social and behavioral change, communication and advocacy, based in Bangladesh and in the Netherlands. So we are private sector, so we have taken this initiative from the private sector and working with the non-profit sector. So what we see that the NGOs and different institutions and organizations, they see us not as a competitor, but rather supporting organization who is providing and facilitating a platform for them. The second thing is that our platform is, the approach is very much from service delivery. We are trying to provide services, knowledge services and networking services to our members who are member organizations and individual members. There are so they see us as a kind of service delivery, and that service delivery approach is, in our opinion, is working very well. And the third is we consider our member not only member but also a subscriber. So the members, they can see what they are having. They subscribe the online ShareNet online platform, ShareNet app, and they get services from this platform. So our experiences, what we have seen, we have done an evaluation, and what we see that this approach, combination of these three things, has resulted into a very successful platform for knowledge sharing in sexual and reproductive health and rights in Bangladesh. And this is the result so far, and over to Nujhat.
Okay. So ShareNet, this platform has been active in Bangladesh for the last 5 to 6 years. So far, we have more than 1,500 individual members, more than 150 organizational members. We've had active. Right now, we have 3 active communities of practice working on issues like child marriage and infertility. And with our grants, we have our own 15 research publications. And we encourage everybody to visit the website of ShareNet to read these publications. It will give you a very deep insight into the SRHR scenario of Bangladesh. So here are just a few testimonials on what the members have to say, and people like all the participants over here are encouraged to become a member of ShareNet Bangladesh. I'll leave a link in the chat box. So we are ending our presentation here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Arnob and Nujhat. I think in a space like sexual and reproductive health rights, there's so much potential for cross-learning, and fantastic to see what a vibrant community of practice ShareNet has built over the years. Are there any questions from people in the room? If anyone would like to ask any questions, maybe you could raise your hand and then unmute. Anyone? If not, I will start. I do have, Nujhat, or no, I was just wondering, is there a system of, as I understand all of these, and please correct me if I've understood, if I've misunderstood, are all of these organizations who are members of ShareNet primarily working in the nonprofit space, or are there built-in collaborations with government and with public health systems and departments and so on? I was just curious about this.
Yes, thank you for asking this question. Yes, both, actually both. Members are very diverse. They are from NGOs, local NGOs, grassroots level NGOs who are working in sexual and reproductive health rights. Also international NGOs, representatives in Bangladesh, but also members, also government officials who are working for Ministry of Health and Family Planning, doctors, journalists who are interested in reproductive health. So it's a diverse group of members who come together and share their experience from their own expertise. So this is actually how our members are.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I don't see any hands raised. I'm just going to go on asking questions then. Do you think, are there any examples of like anecdotally of really successful cross-learning between organizations or between sectors that you might be able to share without naming names, of course, if required?
Yes, maybe we can give an example. One of the COPs that we have is about child marriage, and there are, as you know, child marriage is a huge problem in Bangladesh. Around half of the children in Bangladesh are getting married off before they're 18, and there are quite a lot of organizations working on combating child marriage in Bangladesh, but all of them work in silos. They are doing their own work. Government is working in the government level, and there are different NGOs working on child marriage in their own areas. What we did, we organized this COP, child marriage, and we organized different sessions with COP members last year. And what happened, there was a tremendous knowledge sharing about good practices, about what works and what doesn't work. And eventually that was resulted into the publication of a booklet about containing new knowledge and experience related to working in child marriage in Bangladesh. So this was very much highly appreciated by different NGOs, and we saw there was a lot of positive energy among the practitioners who saw that the value of knowledge sharing in an accessible way, in a bit non-conventional way, and that we are, you know, it was that is an example that a recent example that I could share.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much. Anyone would like to respond either to this presentation or to Erica's presentation, although we of course can't ask her questions. Any responses, reflections, please do raise your hands. Just let me give it another few seconds. All right. So I think if there are no further questions, let me just say a big thank you to Arnob and Nujhat for the presentation and to Erica for sharing the recording. I just want to leave us with one reflection, and I mean, it's a question I grapple with, so I might as well sort of pass it on to others. And I'm sure people in the room with far more experience might have some thoughts around it, which is that very often we tend to conflate and club sexuality and gender together. And I grapple with this sometimes, and I'll give, particularly in terms of right to privacy and confidentiality. I'll give you an example from the TB tuberculosis context, that when we were recently working to develop guidelines for a gender responsive national framework for TB. And right now the program, the National TB Elimination Program, collects sex disaggregated data. So of course, we know whether the person diagnosed with TB is male, female, or transgender, or identifies as transgender. But of course, we do not collect any data around sexuality and sexual identity and preferences. And one of the discussions that came up in the process of developing this framework is, on the one hand, if we want to ensure that TV services are accessible to vulnerable communities, including people who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, but how do we balance this with the right to privacy and confidentiality? And why should I necessarily have to disclose my sexuality to a healthcare provider? Do I not have the right to that privacy? So, I mean, I don't think there are easy answers to this question, and but it's something I did want to share in the context of the conversations we are having around gender and sexuality today. So I'll pause here and let me say a big thank you to the steering committee for giving me this opportunity, and I'm very happy to have been part of this conversation. And just another gentle reminder that if there are questions around the gender norm scale, Erica's email address is in the chat box, and I think Nujhat has also shared the ShareNet website as well. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to look at it. I see Sukraj, you raising your hands for me.
No, not for you. It was actually to get some silence in my room.
All right. So I will then stop there on that note and hand back to the team. And thank you so much to everyone for joining this session. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. And don't forget to join tomorrow's sessions as well. Yes,
thank you. Thank you so much, Anupama, for moderating this session for us and also leaving us with something to really think about. And like you said, there are no easy answers. It's going to take some time, but it's also something that we need to answer essentially. Like, we need to get onto this. So thank you so much for that. If you look at your chat boxes now, we will also put the link for day 3, which will be around COVID-19 risk communication and community engagement. So the sessions are on that tomorrow. We begin the plenary at 10. So we request everyone to please register on this link, so that you're able to join us, and we will also be sharing the agenda there tomorrow so that you can come into the concurrent sessions. Thank you all for being a great audience, keeping your mics muted, and really, it's always a pleasure for the tech team when we don't have to worry about sound and disturbances. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day, and we hope to see you in day 3 of the South Asia SBCC conversation. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone. Bye.